The meeting between Letitia and Officer Reynolds marked a turning point, not just for them, but for the community as a whole. Word of their conversation spread quickly, sparking discussions about accountability, empathy, and second chances. While some praised Letitia's willingness to engage in dialogue with Reynolds, others remained skeptical, questioning whether his apology was genuine or merely an attempt to salvage his career. But Letitia wasn't focused on public opinion. She was more interested in creating tangible change. Inspired by her growing influence, Letitia partnered with local activists to launch a program called Bridges of Understanding. The initiative aimed to improve relationships between law enforcement and marginalized communities, particularly those living with disabilities. Workshops were organized where officers could interact directly with people who had experienced discrimination or misunderstanding during encounters with police. These sessions weren't lectures. They were raw, honest conversations meant to break down barriers and foster mutual respect. Officer Reynolds volunteered to participate in the program, despite knowing it would be uncomfortable. During one session, he stood before a group of participants recounting the events of that fateful night. His voice trembled as he admitted his mistakes, acknowledging how his actions had dehumanized Letitia and violated her dignity. "I let my frustration get the better of me," he confessed, looking around the room. "But I've learned from this experience and I'm committed to doing better." The audience listened quietly, their expressions ranging from skepticism to cautious optimism. One woman raised her hand hesitantly. "How do we know you mean what you're saying?" she asked. "Words are easy. It's actions that matter." Reynolds nodded, clearly expecting the question. "You're absolutely right," he replied, "and I don't expect anyone to trust me overnight. All I can do is show up every day and try to listen, to learn, and to treat everyone with the respect they deserve." Letitia sat nearby, watching the exchange unfold. She appreciated the woman's honesty and understood why trust wouldn't come easily. But she also saw glimpses of progress, officers leaning in to hear personal stories, asking thoughtful questions, and engaging in ways that showed a desire to understand. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As part of the program, Reynolds began mentoring rookie officers, sharing his story as a cautionary tale. He emphasized the importance of patience, active listening, and recognizing implicit biases. At first, some younger recruits dismissed his advice, viewing him as damaged goods, but over time, they came to respect his vulnerability and commitment to self-improvement. Meanwhile, Letitia continued advocating for broader systemic changes. She spoke at town hall meetings, schools, and conferences, using her platform to highlight issues faced by disabled individuals. Her message was simple yet powerful. We all have challenges, but we also share humanity. Empathy is the bridge that connects us. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Local lawmakers introduced legislation requiring mandatory training for law enforcement officers on interacting with people with disabilities. The bill passed unanimously, thanks in large part to Letitia's advocacy. When the governor signed it into law, she stood proudly beside him, clutching the pen used to seal the document. For Reynolds, the journey toward redemption was ongoing. He returned to duty months later, under close supervision and with new responsibilities focused on community outreach. Though some residents still eyed him warily, many acknowledged his efforts to make amends. Jamal, now a regular volunteer with Bridges of Understanding, occasionally crossed paths with Reynolds at events. Their interactions were awkward at first, but over time, they developed a tentative friendship built on shared goals. One evening, after a particularly impactful workshop, Letitia found herself sitting alone outside the venue, reflecting on how far things had come. Reynolds approached cautiously, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She smiled and gestured for him to sit. They talked for a while, not about apologies or regrets, but about hope, for a future where moments like the one they'd endured together became rare exceptions rather than painful norms. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Letitia felt a sense of peace. Change was slow, messy, and imperfect, but it was happening. And sometimes, That was enough. Months turned into a year, and the ripple effects of Letitia's courage continued to spread far beyond that quiet suburban street. The Bridges of Understanding program grew exponentially, expanding to neighboring cities and even other states. Letitia became a sought-after speaker, traveling across the country to share her story and advocate for systemic reform. Her message resonated deeply with audiences from all walks of life: students, activists, policymakers, and law enforcement officers alike. She didn't just talk about what had happened to her. She used her experience as a lens to highlight broader issues of inequality, bias, and resilience. Officer Reynolds, too, found purpose in his second chance. Though he still faced criticism from some quarters, he threw himself into mentoring young officers and leading training sessions on disability awareness. His transformation wasn't immediate or perfect, but it was genuine. He often shared his story during these workshops, not to seek sympathy, but to remind others that mistakes could be turning points if met with accountability and effort. "I'm proof that you can change," he'd say, looking out at the sea of faces before him. "But it takes work and humility." Jamal, now 17, had grown immensely since filming that fateful night. What started as an impulsive act of defiance evolved into a passion for storytelling and advocacy. Inspired by Letitia's strength, he began documenting stories of marginalized individuals in his community, posting them online under the hashtag #UnseenVoices. His videos gained traction, earning him recognition as a youth leader and activist. When asked about his inspiration, Jamal always credited Letitia. "She showed me that one person's voice can spark a movement." The viral video that started it all remained a powerful symbol, a reminder of both past injustices and the potential for growth. Schools incorporated it into their curriculums, using it to teach students about empathy, accountability, and the importance of standing up for what's right. Even late-night talk shows featured segments about Letitia's journey, celebrating her as a beacon of hope and perseverance. Back in the community where it all began, visible changes took root. The local police department implemented new protocols for interacting with disabled individuals, including mandatory sensitivity training and partnerships with advocacy groups. Officers like Reynolds worked closely with organizations to ensure policies were practical and effective. Slowly but surely, trust began to rebuild, not overnight, but steadily. Letitia, however, never lost sight of the bigger picture. While proud of the progress made, she knew there was still much work to be done. At a national conference held in her honor, she delivered a speech that brought the audience to its feet. "Change isn't something we achieve and then rest on," she said, her voice ringing clear through the auditorium. "It's something we nurture every single day. It's in the small choices we make, the way we treat each other, the way we listen, the way we choose kindness over judgment." As she stepped off the stage, applause thundering around her, Officer Reynolds approached with a smile. They embraced briefly, two people forever linked by a moment that had changed their lives. Later that evening, they sat together at a quiet cafe, reminiscing about how far they'd come. "You know," Letitia said thoughtfully, stirring her tea, "that night wasn't just about us. It was about everyone who feels unseen or unheard. My hope is that our story reminds people they have power, even when they feel powerless." Reynolds nodded, his expression reflective. "And my hope is that no one has to go through what you did because of me, or anyone else. That's why I keep going." Their conversation ended with laughter, lighter than either of them expected. Outside, the world buzzed with activity, protests, debates, celebrations, but inside that cozy cafe there was a sense of peace. Change was happening, piece by piece, person by person. Years later, when historians looked back on this chapter, they wouldn't just see a traffic stop gone wrong. They'd see a woman who refused to let adversity define her, a man who chose redemption over denial, and a teenager who realized the power of his voice. Together, they proved that even in moments of pain and injustice, humanity could shine through, and that perhaps was the greatest legacy of all. In a small, picturesque seaside town where the waves whispered against the shore and the air carried the scent of salt and nostalgia, Evelyn Harper lived a life many would envy. At 92 years old, she was still sharp-witted, kind-hearted, and full of stories from decades gone by. Her husband, Harold, now 94, had been her partner through thick and thin for an astonishing 70 years. Together, they were the epitome of devotion, a bond so strong that it inspired everyone around them. Their love story began in the summer of 1953 at a local dance hall, where Harold had nervously asked Evelyn to dance. She remembered how his hands trembled as he held hers, not because he was afraid, but because he was so smitten. From that moment on, their lives intertwined like the roots of ancient trees. They married within a year, built a home filled with laughter and warmth, raised 2 children, and welcomed grandchildren and great-grandchildren into their ever-growing family. Their wedding anniversary was always celebrated with grandeur, neighbors, friends, and relatives gathering to honor their enduring love. This year's milestone celebration was no different. Balloons adorned their cozy living room, tables groaned. Under the weight of homemade dishes and photographs spanning 7 decades lined the walls. Laughter echoed through the house as people shared memories of Evelyn and Harold's kindness. One neighbor recalled how Harold once shoveled snow for half the neighborhood during a blizzard, while another praised Evelyn for her tireless volunteer work at the church. It seemed there wasn't a soul in town who didn't admire them. But beneath Evelyn's cheerful demeanor lay a quiet curiosity about certain aspects of Harold's past. Over the years, she had noticed small inconsistencies, dates that didn't quite add up, vague answers to questions about his childhood, or moments when his eyes clouded over with what seemed like regret. Whenever she brought these things up, Harold would gently steer the conversation elsewhere, saying, "The past is behind us, my dear. Let's focus on today." And though Evelyn trusted him implicitly, those unanswered questions lingered in the back of her mind like faint echoes. As the anniversary festivities wound down and guests began to leave, Evelyn found herself standing alone in the kitchen, staring out the window at the setting sun. The golden light bathed the room in warmth, but it couldn't dispel the subtle unease she felt. For all the joy they had shared, for all the years they had walked hand in hand, there remained fragments of Harold's life that were shrouded in mystery. Little did Evelyn know, fate was about to push her toward discovering secrets buried deeper than she could have imagined. Secrets that would test the very foundation of their marriage and challenge everything she thought she knew about the man she loved. But for now, as she turned off the lights and climbed the stairs to join Harold, upstairs she pushed the nagging thoughts aside. After all, tomorrow was another day, and who knew what surprises it might hold? The morning after the big celebration, Evelyn woke up with a sense of restlessness she couldn't quite explain. The house was quiet now, the echoes of laughter and music replaced by the soft hum of the wind outside. Harold had already gone for his usual morning walk along the beach, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She decided it was time to tackle the attic, a project she'd been putting off for far too long. Evelyn grabbed a stepladder from the garage and climbed up into the dusty space beneath the roof. Sunlight streamed through the small window, illuminating decades' worth of forgotten treasures. Old furniture covered in white sheets stood like ghosts in the corners, while stacks of boxes lined the walls. Each one seemed to hold fragments of their life together: photo albums, holiday decorations, baby clothes folded neatly in tissue paper. It was overwhelming but also strangely comforting, like stepping back in time. As she began sorting through the boxes, Evelyn's hands brushed against something unexpected, a small wooden chest tucked away behind a stack of books. Its surface was scratched and worn, as if it had been handled many times over the years. Curious, she pulled it closer, running her fingers over the intricate carvings on its lid. Unlike everything else in the attic, this box wasn't dusty, which made her wonder why Harold had hidden it so carefully. Her curiosity deepened when she realized the chest was locked. Determined to uncover its contents, Evelyn searched the room for anything that might serve as a key. After rummaging through drawers and shelves, she finally found an antique clock sitting on Harold's old desk. Inside, nestled among the gears, was a tiny brass key. Her heart raced as she inserted it into the lock and turned it slowly. The click it made echoed in the silent attic, sending a shiver down her spine. When Evelyn opened the chest, she gasped at what lay inside. Faded newspaper clippings were stacked neatly alongside yellowed documents and black and white photographs. At first glance, they seemed harmless enough, just remnants of another era, but something about them felt off. One photograph caught her eye. A younger man staring directly into the camera, his expression cold and calculating. He bore a striking resemblance to Harold, yet there was something unsettling about him. His eyes didn't hold the warmth she associated with her husband. Instead, they seemed to carry a weight of secrets best left buried. Beneath the photos were newspaper articles with headlines that sent chills through Evelyn's body. Words like missing persons, wanted, and questioning jumped out at her. She picked up one clipping dated 1952, describing a local man named Henry Grayson, who had vanished without a trace after being linked to several suspicious disappearances. The name meant nothing to her, but the face in the accompanying picture was unmistakable. It was Harold, or at least someone who looked exactly like him. Evelyn sat back on her heels, her mind racing. Why would Harold keep such things? Was this some kind of prank? Or was there more to his past than he'd ever let on? She glanced toward the attic door, half expecting him to walk in and catch her snooping, but the house remained silent, save for the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. Clutching the box tightly, Evelyn descended the stairs, her heart pounding with equal parts fear and determination. Whatever secrets lay within these pages, she knew she couldn't ignore them any longer. For 70 years she had loved Harold unconditionally, trusting him completely. Now, for the first time, doubt crept into her heart, and it refused to leave. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table. The contents of the wooden chest spread out before her like pieces of a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. The sunlight streaming through the window did little to brighten the heaviness settling over her heart. Each faded newspaper clipping and photograph seemed to whisper secrets from another time, secrets that didn't align with the man she had spent 7 decades loving. The name, Henry Grayson, kept appearing in bold letters across the headlines. Evelyn read the articles carefully, her hands trembling as she absorbed the details. According to the reports, Henry Grayson had been a drifter in his younger years, charming but unpredictable, known for getting into trouble wherever he went. He was accused of petty crimes at first, theft, forgery, and running scams on unsuspecting victims. But then came the darker accusations, disappearances linked to places he'd been seen, people who vanished without explanation. The police never found enough evidence to convict him, but they believed he was involved. And then, just as suddenly as his name appeared in the papers, it disappeared. Henry Grayson vanished, leaving behind only unanswered questions. What chilled Evelyn most were the photographs. In one, a younger version of Harold, or rather, Henry, stood outside a dimly lit bar, cigarette dangling from his lips, eyes cold, and calculating. It was eerie how much he looked like Harold, yet so different. Where Harold's gaze was warm and kind, this man's eyes held a hardness that made Evelyn uneasy. Another photo showed him surrounded by police officers, his expression defiant, almost daring them to prove something against him. As she sifted through the documents, Evelyn noticed a birth certificate tucked beneath the clippings. Her breath caught when she saw the name, Henry James Grayson. The date of birth matched Harold's exactly. Her mind raced. Could it really be possible? Had Harold been living under a false identity all these years? She stared at the evidence, trying to reconcile the man in the photos with the husband who had held her hand through life's joys and sorrows. But there was more. Beneath the birth certificate, she found letters written in shaky handwriting, addressed to someone named H. They weren't signed, but their tone was apologetic, pleading even. One letter read, "I know you want to leave your past behind, but running won't make it go away. You have to face what you've done." Evelyn's stomach churned. Who wrote these? And what had Harold or Henry done that required forgiveness? Her thoughts spiraled as she tried to piece everything together. If Harold had once been Henry Grayson, why had he changed his name? Did he truly escape his old life, or had he simply buried it deep enough that no one would find it? And if he had left that life behind, why keep this box full of reminders? None of it made sense. Evelyn glanced at the clock on the wall. Harold would be back from his walk soon. She quickly gathered the items and returned them to the chest, her heart pounding. For 70 years, she thought she knew everything about the man she loved. Now, staring at the locked box sitting innocently on the table, she realized she might not know him at all. Whatever truths lay hidden within those pages, they were about to shake the foundation of her world, and there was no turning back. When Harold returned from his walk, Evelyn was waiting for him in the living room. The wooden chest sat on the way, coffee table between them, its presence heavy and unignorable. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, and though she tried to appear calm, her racing heart betrayed her anxiety. She had rehearsed what she would say a dozen times in her head, but now that the moment had arrived, the words felt stuck in her throat. Harold walked in, humming a tune, his usual cheerful self, until he saw the box. His smile faltered, and for a brief second Evelyn thought she saw panic flicker across his face. Then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by an expression of casual curiosity. "What's this?" he asked, gesturing toward the chest. His voice was light, almost playful, but Evelyn noticed the faint tremor underneath. "You tell me," Evelyn replied, her tone sharper than she intended. She pushed the box closer to him, watching as his eyes darted between her and the object on the table. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched taut like a wire ready to snap. Finally, Harold sighed and sank into the chair opposite her. He didn't reach for the box or try to explain. Instead, he leaned back, rubbing his temples as if bracing himself for something inevitable. "I wondered when this day would come," he said softly, almost to himself. Evelyn's pulse quickened. "What do you mean? What is all this, Harold?" She gestured toward the chest, her voice rising slightly. "These newspapers, these pictures, this name, Henry Grayson. Who is he? And why does he look exactly like you?" Harold chuckled nervously, shaking his head. "It's complicated, Evelyn. It's a part of my life I hoped I'd left far behind." "Left behind?" Evelyn repeated, incredulous. "You're saying you used to be someone else? That you've been lying to me for 70 years? "No," Harold interjected quickly, leaning forward. "Not lying. Not exactly. I changed." "Evelyn, I became a better man. The person I was before, I wasn't proud of him. I wanted to leave that life behind and start fresh. When I met you, I knew I finally could." Evelyn stared at him, her mind struggling to process his words. "So you admit it? You are Henry Grayson?" Harold hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, but that's not who I am anymore. That name, it doesn't define me. Not after everything we've built together. But the things they accused you of." Evelyn trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. She picked up one of the newspaper clippings and held it out to him. "Disappearances, scams, running from the law. How am I supposed to believe none of that matters?" Harold looked down at his hands, his shoulders sagging under the weight of her questions. "I can't change the past, Evelyn. Yes, I made mistakes, terrible ones. But I swear to you, I never hurt anyone. I ran because I was scared, because people expected the worst of me. And when I met you, I realized I had a chance to be more than what everyone thought I was." His words hung in the air, fragile and pleading. Evelyn wanted to believe him, to trust that the man sitting before her was truly the man she had loved all these years. But the evidence in the box told a different story. How could she reconcile the two versions of Harold? "I need time to think," she said finally, standing up abruptly. This is too much. I don't know what to say right now." Harold reached for her hand, but she pulled away. There was desperation in his eyes, but also something else, a deep, aching regret. "Please, Evelyn," he whispered. "Don't let this ruin us. I love you. Everything I did, every choice I made. After meeting you, it was all for you." Evelyn didn't respond. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving Harold alone with the chest and the ghosts of his past. As she stood by the window, staring at the ocean, tears welled up in her eyes. 70 years of love and trust suddenly felt like sand slipping through her fingers, and she didn't know how to hold on to it anymore. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Evelyn moved through the house like a shadow, her mind consumed by the revelations hidden in the wooden chest. Harold, on the other hand, seemed to age overnight. The confident man she had known for decades was replaced by someone quieter, more fragile. He didn't press her for answers or try to explain further. He simply waited, his eyes filled with a mix of guilt and hope every time their paths crossed. It was on the 4th day after their confrontation that an unfamiliar car pulled into their driveway. Evelyn watched from the window as a tall, gray-haired man stepped out. His posture was formal, his suit crisp, but there was something about him that felt both authoritative and weary. She opened the door before he could knock, her heart pounding as she took in his serious expression. "Mrs. Harper?" the man asked gently. When Evelyn nodded, he introduced himself as Detective Walter Crane, retired from the force but still consulting on cold cases. "I apologize for showing up unannounced, but I need to speak with your husband." Evelyn froze, her mind racing. How did this stranger know Harold? And why now, after all these years? She glanced over her shoulder, where Harold stood hesitantly in the hallway. Seeing the look on her face, he stepped forward, his voice steady despite the unease in his eyes. "It's all right, Evelyn, let him in." They sat together in the living room, the air thick with unspoken questions. Detective Crane wasted no time getting to the point. "Mr. Harper, or should I say Mr. Grayson, we've reopened some old cases thanks to advances in forensic technology. Evidence has surfaced linking you to several incidents in the early 1950s. I'm here to ask you to come with me for questioning." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She turned to Harold, searching his face for any sign of denial or outrage. But instead of fighting back, Harold simply nodded, his shoulders slumping in resignation. "I see," he said quietly. "I suppose this day was bound to come." Detective Crane explained that DNA samples taken from long-forgotten crime scenes had matched Harold's profile in a national database, a result of routine testing done during a hospital visit years earlier. While Harold hadn't been convicted of anything at the time, the new evidence reignited interest in the cold cases. Evelyn listened in stunned silence, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. "Harold," she whispered, turning to him. "Is this true? Are you that man they're talking about?" Harold met her gaze, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Yes, Evelyn. My name was Henry Grayson once. But I swear to you, I never harmed anyone. I ran because I was scared. Scared of being blamed for things I didn't do. Scared of becoming the person everyone thought I was." Detective Crane cleared his throat, interrupting the moment. "We'll need to verify your claims, Mr. Harper. If you cooperate fully, we may be able to resolve this without unnecessary hardship." Harold agreed without hesitation. As he prepared to leave with the detective, Evelyn found herself torn between anger and fear. This wasn't how she imagined their lives unfolding, not after 70 years of love and trust. Yet, even as her world crumbled around her, she couldn't bring herself to turn away from him completely. Before stepping outside, Harold paused, looking back at Evelyn one last time. "I love you," he said softly, his voice breaking. "No matter what happens, please remember that." And with that, he walked out the door, leaving Evelyn alone in the quiet house. The weight of his words lingered in the air, mingling with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. For the first time in decades, Evelyn felt truly alone, and unsure if the man she loved would ever return as the same person she thought she knew. In the days following Harold's departure with Detective Crane, Evelyn found herself unable to sit still. The house felt impossibly empty without him, each creak of the floorboards or rustle of the curtains magnified in the silence. Her mind was a whirlwind of unanswered questions, and she knew she couldn't simply wait for answers to come to her. If Harold's past held secrets that could shatter their life together, she needed to understand them fully. Determined, Evelyn began piecing together the fragments of Henry Grayson's life. She visited the local library, spending hours poring over microfiche records and old newspapers. Librarians, curious about her sudden interest in decades-old crimes, offered hesitant assistance but kept their distance when they saw the intensity in her eyes. Evelyn didn't blame them. She barely recognized herself these days, driven by a mix of fear, anger, and an unrelenting need for truth. What she uncovered painted a troubling picture. Henry Grayson had indeed been a drifter, moving from town to town in the late 1940s and early 1950s. He was charming enough to win people over quickly, but his charm often masked questionable behavior. In one small town, he'd been accused of swindling elderly residents out of their savings through fake investment schemes. In another, he'd disappeared shortly after a young woman went missing, though no direct evidence tied him to her case. Each story added weight to the accusations against him, yet none provided definitive proof of violent wrongdoing. Evelyn also sought out people who might remember Henry Grayson personally. Tracking down leads wasn't easy. Most of the individuals connected to those cases were long gone, but she eventually found a retired journalist named Margaret, who had covered some of the incidents in the 1950s. Over tea at Margaret's cozy home, Evelyn listened intently as the older woman recounted what she knew. There were whispers, Margaret said, stirring her cup thoughtfully. Some believed Henry was involved in darker things than petty theft, human trafficking even, but nothing stuck. He always slipped away before anyone could pin anything on him. Evelyn's stomach churned at the word trafficking, but, she pressed on, did anyone ever say he changed? That maybe he tried to leave that life behind? Margaret hesitated, then nodded slowly. There were rumors around 53 or so. Folks claimed he'd settled down somewhere, started fresh. No more scams, no more trouble. Some said love did it. A woman turned him around. She gave Evelyn a knowing look. Could have been you, dear. The idea lingered in Evelyn's mind as she left Margaret's house. Had falling in love with her truly changed Harold? Or rather, Henry? Was it possible that the man she married was not the same person he'd once been? It was a comforting thought, yet it didn't erase the lingering doubts gnawing at her heart. Back home, Evelyn spread out her findings on the dining table, creating a timeline of Henry Grayson's life. Among the documents, she noticed something peculiar. A gap of several months between his last known criminal activity and the date she first met him. During that time, there were no newspaper articles, no police reports, no trace of him at all. It was as if he'd vanished, and perhaps re-emerged as Harold Harper, ready to start anew. As Evelyn stared at the timeline, tears welled up in her eyes. She wanted desperately to believe that Harold had redeemed himself, that the man she loved was genuine. Yet the evidence suggested a man capable of deception and evasion. How much of his transformation was real, and how much was just another layer of disguise? Her search for answers only deepened her internal conflict. Love and loyalty warred with betrayal and mistrust, leaving her caught in a storm of emotions she couldn't escape. For 70 years, she had believed she knew everything about Harold. Now, faced with the possibility that she might never truly know him, Evelyn realized the hardest part was yet to come, deciding whether forgiveness was still possible or if the past had finally caught up with them both.